Shooter ready? Stand by. Go!
Howdy everyone, welcome back to another episode of Slide Bite, and today we're going to go over something that has been on my wall for a really long time, and I feel like today is the right day to finally talk about it. Today we're going to be talking about the Golden Eagle plastic M4 gas blowback rifle. This is not an AEG, this is a actual full polymer upper and lower gas blowback rifle. Now, a lot of people in the Heavy Recoil Club told me that when I was buying this, that this is going to blow up in my hands. I kind of believe them, and that sort of interest in that aspect made me want this gun even more. And I'm kind of delighted to say that it has disappointed me in that aspect. This gun lasted me more than I thought it would actually last. I genuinely thought when I took it out to the range and beat the crap out of a target with this thing, that it would blow up in my hands and I would end up going to the hospital and having to, re-sew my hands back into place. But no, this gun has actually outshined my expectations. It's surpassed my expectations in every single way. I set the bar very low for this, and it's honestly done very well for itself. So before I begin this video, I just want to say, you may have noticed that I started an Airsoft Extreme in the trailer or in the beginning video, and I went over to the new shooting range. And I also am going to start using new targets now, which is pretty cool. Although I accidentally ordered 80 instead of 8, so now I'm kind of stuck with them for the meantime. But anyways, back to the video. Like always, we're going to go ahead and take this to the table. I'm going to go ahead and take this thing apart. There isn't really much in terms of trades. There isn't any. And the more important stuff, the more interesting stuff is actually inside the gun. So out of the way, let's go ahead and take it to the table. All right, so we have the Golden Eagle M4 out on the table, and to quickly go over the externals, I have pretty much done very minimal except change the stock, and we'll go over that in handling later. But aside from that, markings wise, there's nothing really distinguishable about the gun. The only defining feature, or the only noticeable feature, is the fire selector, which is just like any other standard M4. Aside from that, you have markings on the Picatinny rail, basically just notifying which position you're putting your equipment on. Pretty standard. So let's go ahead and start disassembly, because this is where the interesting stuff happens. So taking this handguard off is just like any other AR. Just simply pulled on the handle there and it falls off quite handily. Generic M4 style handguard with Picatinny on it, and I've got some toys on the rails there. So the first thing that I want to note is the hop-up on this. The hop-up is very easy to locate. It's literally right in the barrel right there, and you can just simply adjust it like so. And it clicks quite loudly, so you can tell that it's being adjusted. Generic box standard Western Arms M4 gas magazine, holds 30 rounds, holds quite a bit of gas actually for what it really is. Has a odd little reset roller here for the hammer and your hold open right there, and metal feed lips. Feeding this gun is honestly kind of strange. Instead of feeding it through the top like VFC, you have to feed it through the front, and that can lead to some issues when I talk about this later on. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the insides, because that's the more intriguing part. So I'm gonna just simply punch on that. Because the lower and upper are polymer, these tend to stick a little bit, So trying to push on this with your finger is, well, it's going to be difficult. And the front pin here, for some reason, I've tried to punch it, but it just refuses to come out. So I'm not going to try on that. Opening up the gun, the buffer tube is going to come flying out. And we have your box standard buffer spring. No big deal. This isn't the interesting part. What's interesting is this. This is your buffer. Or, yeah, I think this is your buffer. And the one thing that you'll notice is that, unlike other gas blowbacks, this is made exclusively of polymer. And not only that, they did some effort in trying to lighten the amount of polymer they used in this thing. So as such, you get a very nice, strong, snappy recoil because of how light this is. And we'll go into performance and handling and how this contributes to it. This is a really impressive little piece of polymer. So, moving on to the other parts of the gun, just going to simply pull this out. We have a charging handle. It's not the most amazing charging handle in the world. It just does what it does. But what's interesting is the bolt carrier group. Now, bear in mind, I use a lot of the newer VFC gas systems, and I have never seen a gas system that uses a brass nozzle here. Even my Tokyo Marui MWS Howa Type 89 doesn't have something as odd as that inside of it. I'm assuming that this gives it a better seal around the BB so that you can force more gas at down the barrel than your box standard plastic one. For reference, I actually pulled my 416 bolt group out just to kind of give you a view of that. You can see that actually right here my bolt carrier group is starting to get some wear. Fair enough, the bolt carrier group is starting to fall apart a little bit, but compared to this is honestly holding up very well, and this is actually slightly denser. I think this might be made of steel or just denser pot metal, if that's even possible. This is a really strange bolt carrier group for what is essentially a dirt cheap gun, cheaper than most AEGs. So yeah, that's kind of strange. And you can see by dimensions they're about the same. And you can see the lineage of the Western arm system in the VFC here and most other gas blowbacks. A lot of gas systems use the Western arm system as their basis for all their later M4 style gas blowback guns. Alright, so that is pretty much the end of the table. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together off camera, and we'll see you back at performance and handling. Alright, so now that we're back from performance and handling, let's talk about the handling of this thing. So this is where it gets kind of boring, but it's also kind of interesting at the same time. Because the way the gun is made and the materials that they use, this gun is about 50% lighter than your box standard GHK, KWA, VFC, M4 style of rifle. This is a very light gun at around 3 to 4 pounds unloaded, loaded, and without any of the toys on it. It is a remarkably light weapon, and it helps you in a couple of ways. For one, it is easier to draw down very fast. This gun is so light, and it feels like it's not there.
Stand by.
And you can essentially just kind of swing around very nicely. It feels almost as light as a Nerf gun with the magazine out, and it's really neat. You can essentially do a lot of training with this, or essentially a lot of cool John Wick things if you're into that sort of thing. And two, it really enhances the recoil. Now, what do I mean by that? So a lot of gas systems, how they work is they simply shoot gas back this way and send the bolt flying into the buffer. Pretty straightforward, just like any other gun in real life. However, this has really, really good recoil of its class, and it makes sense when you think about it from a technical standpoint. Because the bolt is made of metal of some sort, it's very dense, and the gun itself is very light, and the buffer is very light, there's not much in the way of resisting that giant piece or this large piece of metal going back at high speed into your shoulder and giving you a nice kick. So as a result, This gun has some of the sharpest and the most intense recoil I have felt in a gas blowback, bar none so far. And it's down to just how this thing is made. And I know that Golden Eagle were probably going for the cheapest they can do without killing anyone. And you know what? As a result, they made a very enjoyable gun when it comes to trying to find the most recoil for your particular for your particular setup. Aside from that, it handles just like any other M4. Everything is easy to grab, easy to reach, and the way it's made, you can definitely toy this out to a SOP mod, Mark 18, whatever you want. This is a M4. They're basically the Legos of the rifle world. The one quirk I did notice when handling the gun is that it does tend to shake a lot. Now, I noted in my KWA video that the receivers tend to wobble. It's pretty much the same on this, but it's not as, well, it's not as prominent. You can tell that it does have some flex in it, and that is just due to how the thing is made. And I noticed that if I'm gripping it like so, and I'm pulling if I can pull like this, you can't see it, but I can actually see the gun actually twisting like that. So if you guys like to muscle your guns, this is not a good option for you guys, because you may actually snap the plastic on this. So aside from that, if you are a child, I guess, trying to get into gas blowbacks, and you're trying to convince your parents that you want this, I'd say go for it, because you'd have a pretty good chance, as it's very light, it's very cheap, and it'll last. It's honestly been quite durable in my current experiences with it. And that leads to performance of the gun. So performance, I've noted, is honestly not that bad. Using .25s in this, I was actually getting the same range of FPS that Evike lists on their on their website. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember doing my own personal chronograph on this with .25s. It was slightly lower, but it's around the same FPS range if it was in 2.0s. Accuracy wise, I noticed that this is decent when it comes to fire, or to at least accurate fire. We were doing shooting out to about 100-150 feet, hitting targets no problem. Leading, of course, is a different issue. And it's honestly doing relatively well in overall categories for ballistics in terms of felt recoil, as we went over in handling. The recoil on this is excellent, and I'm going to keep talking about that. And it's definitely very light. It's very comfortable to hold in the hands. Doesn't tire out your arms. I've been holding this for about half an hour while talking to the camera here, and I just haven't gotten tired. This is a very light gun. One thing I forgot to mention in handling is the stock. So I changed out the stock for a Magpul one because the stock just kept rattling. Whenever I was using this and I was aiming down sights, it just kept shaking in my hands. And the gun already feels pretty loose as it is, despite being brand new, sorta. And it just kept rattling, and it got on my nerves, and I had this stock lying around, so I stuck it on it. And to tell you the truth, this stock probably costs about as much, or at least half of the gun, so yeah. This is very cheap. Now, I know I've been kind of alluding to the price of this gun, so I'll tell you how much I spent on this. This gun came in at $148 before taxes. Now, that is incredibly cheap for a gas blowback rifle. Most rifles average about $300 to $200, depending on where you're buying it from, and before shipping. This is way below average market value for a gas blowback. VFC's average $300, KWA's average about $300 as well. Same, GHK is punching well above that at $400, and don't even start with me on Viper Tacs. Those are probably the creme de la creme of gas blowbacks. But in terms of my overall experiences with M4 platform gas blowbacks, this one has kind of blown me away, just because I was expecting this to be a terrible piece of junk, and it turned out to be a decent rifle for what it actually is. And I'm gonna be honest here, it's honestly kind of won my heart in terms of how well it has performed with me. Now, granted, I've beat the hell out of this. I've thrown it around. I've beaten the IPSC target with this and threw it through one of the targets, and it just still refuses to die on me, and it just continues to work. And I think it's part in part because the gun is so flexible. So in the end, if I was to recommend this, I could recommend this to anyone who wants a fairly reliable gun that is dirt cheap. So if you break this, you're not going to miss it. But if you're a first timer getting into gas blowbacks, I cannot recommend any better gun than the Golden Eagle plastic M4. And with that out of the way, that's pretty much the end of the video. Thank you for sticking around this far. And one other thing, thank you for 260 subscribers. I know it's 10 subscribers late to 250, but you know what? I'm very thankful for what I have so far. And yeah, before I get any more sentimental, get out of the way, take care, see you in the next video.